Monday, March 10th school committee meeting. If you would all rise for us, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Alrighty. Well, this evening we have a very special guest, and I'd like to ask Miss Riley Walsh to come on up, and she's going to meet with Superintendent Sorrell.
Sorry, right here. This is for you. You're right here, Mom. So, Riley, can you tell everybody what your name is?
Riley
What's your last name?
Walsh,
And what grade are you in? What grade are you in, Riley?
first grade.
First grade. Who's your teacher?
Miss Doherty.
Miss Doherty. So I heard that you did something pretty special. What did you do?
I donated books.
How many books?
I don't know.
I heard it was a lot.
1,000.
2,000 books. Can you count to 2,000? No. But somebody helped you, right? Good. So, Riley, and who did you give these books to?
I forget.
Camp? A camp?
Name of the camp?
Camp,
Mm-hmm.
What's the name of the camp?
Sunshine.
And who goes there?
Oh, I forget.
So, are those children in need of some special love that go to this camp
Yeah.
because they're sick?
Yeah.
What do they have?
Cancer.
So you and your mom and your friends and all the children at the elementary school and children at your grandmother's elementary school and teachers all gave you books to give to camp. So do you have any plans for any future projects?
I don't know.
Do you remember? You wanted to do the stuffed animals.
I want to do the stuffed animals.
Donate stuffed animals.
I want to donate stuffed animals.
To the same camp because those children need something to cuddle with?
Yeah.
Well, we thank you so much for all your hard work and all the friends at Carver Elementary School, and we want you to stand up and we'll give you a big hand.
Thank you, Riley. Well, congratulations. That was a great job that you did and a great effort. I can't imagine 2,000 books. That's tremendous. And those kids will benefit and love them. So thank you. With that,
Thank you, Mom, for bringing
yes, and thank you, Mom. We won't make you stay because we know it's a school night. With that, we will open comments from the general public, and I know tonight we're going to be discussing a lot about the budget, so I will have an opportunity for the public to ask questions again after we've presented the budget. So if your comments or questions are pertaining to that, we'll have some time to do that after. But if not, we'll also open up to the general public. Mr. Dunn?
That's a tough act to follow.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan Dunham, 11 Ricard Street. And I didn't see it on the agenda, but there are a couple of things coming up at the middle high school that I thought the board should be made aware of, as well as the public and those watching on TV. First is this Thursday night at 7 o'clock. It's the senior show. This benefits the senior class. Admission is $5 at the door. It's a good variety type show that the seniors put on. Usually there's some humor at the expense of some of the teachers and administrators, but you know, it's a good time. And also, a big event is March 26th. That's March Music Madness. That's cabaret style performance put on every year. It benefits the Music Boosters Club. It's a chance to really, for the students that are involved in the middle high school music program, to really show their stuff. And we are very fortunate in this town that we have some tremendously talented students. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and list the seniors that are going to be performing, because this will be one of the last chances we'll get a chance to see them perform here at the Carver Middle School. As far as instrumentalists, soloists will be Ben Bonaparte and Alexandra Gamaris, and the jazz ensemble, the seniors will be Brandon Walsh, Casey Armanetti, Aaron Banbury, Andrew Ryan, Sam Reed, Chris McGrath, Samantha McGrath, Ben Bonaparte, Chris Zamora, Alexander Gamaris, Josh Goodman, and Matthew Foster. And if nobody's had a chance to see Mr. Tunis lead that jazz band, he really gets into it, and they really get into it too. They do a tremendous job. Vocalists, senior vocalists this year will be Catherine Hildebrandt, Tristan Marshall, Nathaniel Singer, Jess Rizzuto, and Alana Dunham. Again, it's the 26th. Admission is $8 for adults, $5 for students and senior citizens. There is a $25 cap per family. And because of the money that the Booster Club raised last year, they were able to go ahead and present 3 $500 scholarships to students that participate in the Carver Middle High School music program. So I really strongly encourage anybody that has a chance. It's a cheap night out, and it's a great entertainment. Also, the students serve desserts and drinks. They bring them waiters. So it's really a good time. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that information. With that, we'll open it up and welcome up Donna from the APC. There you are.
Good evening, everyone. In case the people in the audience don't watch this once a month on Monday nights, I'm Donna Ramsey. I'm the president of the Plymouth Carver Education Association, and we have 1,270 members. So I represent both Plymouth and Carver and deal with both school committees. Good evening to all of you. Unfortunately, last Monday, I was present at 2 staff meetings where Dr. Sorrell had to present the budget, the proposed budget for this coming year. It was very apparent that this budget projection is devastating. And it's also very apparent that the unfunded mandates have taken their toll. And I did not know, I picked up these papers when I came in, but to me, there's a paper in here that talks about unfunded mandates. And we have talked about it at this school committee, and we've talked about it in Plymouth. And these are the things that have been required by powers outside of the school systems to require that there be some sort of funding that is not reimbursed. I look at it this way as far as Carver is concerned. It's almost like over the past 8 to 10 years, you've been playing the game of Jenga. And each year, when you look at what your budget is, they carefully, as a team, choose which pieces that they can carefully push out of the game and still not impact the education of the students. It's amazing to me that how they've been able to do it, and I have a deep appreciation for the teamwork that is involved to be able to continue the great education that your kids have in Carver right now. But unfortunately, this latest budget, if it remains the same, is going to have a ripple effect that not only is going to threaten layoffs, but most definitely is going to be felt throughout the entire town. There will be educators that will be afraid of not coming back next year. There will be educators afraid of their programs and nervous for their programs. There'll be students that will be feeling the impact of this because this will be very, very uncertain time for all of them. And there's no way around it. Serious choices will have to be made, and some of these pieces that they start to push out this time is going to end up affecting the structure. And it could definitely damage the foundation of the Carver Education Association. And also all of the Carver students, the Carver teachers, the parents, everyone, everybody will feel the impact. We'll all be left holding our breath when they finish pushing out all of these pieces and hoping that it doesn't topple. And everybody will do everything that they can in their power to make sure that that doesn't happen. So please, we need you to do everything that you can to not let this happen. I urge everyone viewing, everyone in this room, everybody in the school system and in the town to work together to come up with a solution to this deficit. And I'm going to ask you to go one step further. I'm going to ask you to please contact your local representatives and federal representatives to let them know that these unfunded mandates need to be funded by someone else other than you. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Well said, Donna.
Thank you. With that, do we have student representatives from the Captain's Council or Student Advisory Council? I do see some, yes. Come on up.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks. So last week, 13 members of the High School Student Council attended the annual Massachusetts Association of Student Council State Conference, which was March 5th through the 7th. The student council officers who attended were President Carrie Walsh, Vice President Tristan Marshall, Spirit Coordinators Jess Ferguson and myself, Brittany McCarran, Secretary Gigi Tracy, and photojournalist Sam Gouvermont. The representatives were Monica Walsack, Alyssa Bender, Mackenzie Aragle, Jenna Wells, Julia Pierce, Kaylin Rooney, and Noelle Walton, and Mary Chisholm. The state conference is an opportunity for our high school student leaders to participate in numerous leadership workshops, listen to well-renowned national motivational speakers, and engage with over 1,000 student leaders from 70 state high school student councils to exchange ideas and increase student involvement, increasing student school spirit, and help inspire other students to emerge within schools such as leaders. Our council was also awarded Gold Council of Excellence, which recognizes outstanding student councils across the state for the school and the community events and charitable contributions. Our school was only one of 28 schools across the state to be given this award, and we've received that the past 2 out of 3 years. This week at the high school is Spirit Week. Today we had a motivational speaker, Tony Pina, who taught at Silver Lake High School the past 18 years, has advised their student council during the past 16 years, and was actually a graduate from Carver High School in the class of 1992. His message was about finding your passion and focusing all your effort and attention to achieve your passion in life. He came to CHS to speak to grades 9 through 12 to kick off our Spirit Week and inspire staff and students. The 5 Spirit Days for this week would be America Monday, Twin Tuesday, Way Too Bright Wednesday, Tony Award Thursday, and Fun Filled Friday, which is our class colors. This Friday is both Spirit Week and the Pep Rally from 1 o'clock, and at our Student Council lock-in is Friday night starting at 7 and lasting until Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Upcoming in April, student councils will be attending Spring CMAS Conference at Rockland High School and sponsoring our 2nd annual Salvation Army clothing drive. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there a representative from Captain's Council tonight? Yes. Good job. All right. If they come later, then we'll give them an opportunity to speak. With that, we'll move on to approval of minutes of the February 10th, 2014 regular session minutes.
I move that we approve the regular session minutes from February 10th, 2014.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just an abstention since I wasn't here.
Absolutely.
I'd actually like to just make a point of clarification on that.
Sure.
Considering it is public record.
Yep.
On page 3, under C, budget presentation, there's a discussion where it says, James O'Brien said no town commercial revenue. With no town commercial revenue, it's important for Carver to find a sustainable revenue source, which will involve community effort. And I think that's most likely going to be a big part of what we need to do to move forward. But I also want to clarify that, and if it was said that way, it wasn't meant to be no commercial revenue, because clearly there are some great businesses in this town. And we do have a base that I don't want to feel that I'm not acknowledging, because there is a great small business in this town. It's something bigger that we need to look at as a community, adding to what we have in order to make what we want viable.
Absolutely.
Because without
James, would a better word be limited?
thank you. Yep.
So Emery, can you make that change? I would. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So with the amended minutes, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 And one abstained. With that, we'll move on to communication. Liz?
Yes, we have our new town administrator who has not yet been to a school committee meeting, so it's his first opportunity, and we'd like to invite him up here. He has some proposed policies he presented to the Board of Selectmen. He's going to be here. You've had him in your packet to review, and he can answer some questions.
Welcome.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you. I apologize for my voice. I've been battling a cold for a few days, and it's a head cold, and balancing numbers with a head cold is not something I would recommend. Let me just start by giving a quick overview about who I am. I started here at this position on January 10th. I'm a father of two children, 12 and 10-year-old. My 10-year-old daughter's going on 30. And I've been actively involved in the school district in my hometown, served on the school council for one of our schools for a 3-year period. My wife is president of the district-wide PSO for about 3 years straight. And if you talk to the superintendent in my former town or to anyone in the school committee, I'm a big advocate for the schools. And why is that? Because the lifeblood of a community is the school district. That's one of the main things we do, is to educate our children and make sure that they have the ability to survive into the world and make sure they have the tools necessary to do that. I will also echo the president of the Teachers Association with the unfunded mandates. Those are a big issue here in Carver. The superintendent has made me aware of one that really caught me by surprise, and that is for some students that don't live in town, have never lived in town, reside in a hospital, unfortunately, because of their illness. But the custodian, if you will, or the caretaker has been assigned to Carver, and now we have to pick up, we as a community have to pick up that couple $100,000 cost, again, for a child that's that has never been in town. And without having the state come through and actually help support those type children, it's a burden that is significantly having an impact on your budget. And that's just one of the things that I think should be addressed. A lot of the other unfunded mandates have been around for a while, but that one's just one that's just so big that when you look at the budget, and I know you all have, that really took me by surprise. You know, the budget season we're in is challenging. You hear this every year, and it is what it is. But I will tell you, when I came into Carver and started looking at the finances and trying to figure out with the limited resources where we go to make our budgets work. On the town side of government, just like on the school side of government, actually, let me back up 2 steps. One of the things that I try to do is that I try to, and I've been successful in breaking down barriers, school versus town, town versus school. Very pleased to see that doesn't exist here in Carver. You have a wonderful superintendent, a business manager that I'm not happy about who's leaving, but who's done a great job here, and I've met the principals, and you've got a great team together. When we look at the finances for new finances coming into the town, we're somewhat limited, and they basically come from 4 different areas. One is under Prop 2.5, we're allowed to tax 2.5% above what we took in last year. When you look at that number, that's about $500,000. I think it's $507,000 to be exact, but for easy math, let's call it $500,000. The second main item is when you look at state aid. And when you weigh out all of the state aid coming, and I don't want to use the word all because there's not a lot, versus the deducts that they do for accounting assessment, we're about $50,000 townwide into the black. And I think 43,000 of that is Chapter 70. So again, 500,000, 50,000. The next piece is local receipts, and local receipts are building permits and those types of fees. Those are pretty level in Carver. They don't go up much. We are going to be looking to address that, but that's something that you won't realize for another year down the road. And the fourth item is what's called new growth. New growth comes in 2 different forms: real estate, new real estate development, houses that have been built, major additions that have been put on, a couple small businesses that have been constructed in town. And that amount projected for FY15 is about $70,000. So what are we looking at? $620,000 of new money. There is some additional personal property new growth, but that has been designated to go into a building maintenance fund. I have, with these policies, which I'm going to be talking about in a second, have broadened the scope of that so that it also includes capital outlay, because one of my concerns was that if we need to focus on our infrastructure, is key, and a lot of times that gets shortchanged when money gets tight. So I'm a big believer in supporting the infrastructure pieces, whether that's building or the capital outlay equipment, which will be vehicles, generators, computers, whatever it may be, is to broaden that scope so that the personal property and debt roll-off will maintain those key components that we need to have a town. So, again, that's what we're looking at in new revenue. When we start to analyze what our fixed costs are, fixed cost, again, community-wide, it doesn't matter whether school or town, things we have no control over. We're looking at healthcare. Minimum of $180,000 is probably going to be a little over $200,000. It's going up 5%. This town made significant strides years ago when it moved to the gateway system, and that saved the town millions of dollars over a couple of years. Now it's time to relook at where we are, and programs change. Organizations change, and we need to reassess our healthcare system. That's something that Pat and I are taking a hard look at, and there are some opportunities for savings. We may not see those savings until 2016, but based upon new data we are looking at, we see some opportunities. Again, that's good news in the long term, not good news in the short term. So plan on 200,000 of that 620 is just gone, just because of healthcare. And again, it may be a larger number than that. Second has to do with the pension. And we're part of Plymouth County pension system. And although the teachers are on a different pension plan supported by the state, all the administrators and non-teachers.
The teachers pay their own.
The teachers pay their own.
The state doesn't pay. They pay a very small increment statewide that doesn't amount to 1%. But every teacher pays their own pension.
And if there is any shortfall in that fund, then the state will pick that up, not the district. So on the town and the school side, again, community-wide with Plymouth County, we're looking at another $200,000 there. So you see really quickly that 620 goes. Another liability the town has to do with the North Carver Water District. The North Carver Water District was, and many of you know this a lot more detail than I do, but was built for the long-term development opportunity in the town. I heard some comments about making sure that we can establish new revenue sources. Well, one of the things the town found out a while ago was that without more water capacity up around the Route 44, there was not going to be the room for any additional development, because anytime you would put a well in with the protection around it for a certain size, you limit your development capacity. So the town moved forward with that. When the economy was starting to rebound, by the time the project was up and running, the economy slowed down. The projections are off. Doesn't mean it's a bad project, it just means that the assumptions were wrong at the time. We're trying an effort right now to establish what those assumptions are going forward so we all know what the risk is, but it's not something we can just stop. There's $140,000 at least that has to be paid by the town. So now we're up to $540,000 of the $620,000. And the net of this is that there's no new money. There's no new money coming into the town to really have an impact on the budgets. Both the school and the town have the same issue. On the town side, just like the school, we have step raises that are by contract, that people will get a step raise based upon whatever step they're at. Those can't be afforded. The only way that we can afford those is on the town side. We're going to have to actually do one of three things. Excuse me. We're going to have to lay off individuals, or we're going to have to reduce hours, or we're going to have to look at out-of-the-box thinking and figure out how we can potentially consolidate some departments and see through economies of scale if we can reduce the cost of running certain programs within the town and the schools. And that's one of the things that you'll see here in this document, and it's item number 6. And it really goes into the superintendent and the town administrator are to explore opportunities to reduce duplication of services and provide either more efficient or effective services to the residents and/or reduce expenditures. And that could be done by creating a town-wide department that's jointly managed by the superintendent and the town administrator. I'm not in a position right now for us to get into any more detail than that, but to look at the concept component of it is where we have multiple departments that may be doing a little bit of the same thing. Is there an opportunity of consolidating some of those departments so that we can, a win is if we can use the same amount of resources to get more done. That's a success. If we can use less resources and get the same amount or more done, that's a home run. And with the superintendent and your business manager and I and others, we're exploring those opportunities. Again, when you look at our 3 options, layoffs, reduction of hours, or out-of-the-box thinking for some consolidation, this is where we're trying to create money reallocate money that can be better used for teachers, or on the town side, I've been directed via policy of the selectmen to look to fund a full-time detective for the town, excuse me, and also for a school resource officer for the town. Again, there's no new money. The only way we can create those positions is cutting something else or redoing the way we do business. I can say, and I quickly just glanced through the slides, and I know that we're still working to see if there is any money out of that small delta that's available, but I can confidently say that I don't see us having any reduction in the school side, which I know is one of the questions. So what the superintendent's going to go over tonight is your worst case scenario. By no means do I want to say there's a bright light at the end of the tunnel. But at least you know what the worst case scenario is, and any little increment that we can do to save one person at a time, we're certainly going to work together jointly to make that happen. Speaking of the school resource officer, I know that it was several years ago that the town and the schools got rid of the DARE officer, and with some of the heroin epidemics in town that's happening, just like in several other communities too, is that that's one of the policy items that we're here to try to figure out how we can help stem that tide. When it comes down to security of the building, I've also been intimately involved in security of schools. I'm actually certified to teach the ALICE training, which is one of the training programs that are taught to combat these crazy kooks that sometimes sneak into schools. Crazy kooks to sneak into schools. Well, that's an interesting comment. I think you all know what I mean by that, is figuring out how we can put those best resources forward. So, again, I probably went off topic a little bit, but since it's my first meeting, I just wanted to give you a little overview of who I am. So this Town of Carver financial management policies is one of the things that I was hearing through my interview process and talking to others is the town had been in a process of making its budget work year to year, but not really having the time, at least not over the last few years, to really look at the long term and figure out where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. So these financial management policies are designed to provide the backbone, if you will, kind of a framework as to how we look at running the town. And, I'm a big believer that a town, it's at $40 million budget, it's a business. We need to run it as a business. We need to run it so we're financially accountable, transparent, make smart decisions. However, the difference between a government being run in a business versus the private sector is designed to make profit. We're not. We're provided to give good services to the taxpayers that are paying for it. And although I like to say that we need to run as a business, we're a socially responsible business because there are those in our community that sometimes need assistance. And we need to provide that to them, but on a case-by-case process, not just, carte blanche. And again, I think that these financial policies help to get us there. I want to call your attention to basically the middle of the first page where it says financial objectives. And this is really the cornerstone of the document. It's the financial objectives of the Board of Selectmen to demonstrate sound financial management of Carver's taxpayers' resources through earning the highest possible bond rating that includes developing a sustainable town-wide budget based on a 20-year forecast that provides the level of service we can afford within our known projected revenues. Now let me talk about a couple of those things. The reason why a bond rating is important is twofold. One is that it's a third-party independent analysis as to how well the community as a whole is running from its financial standpoint. Do we have all the policies and procedures in place? Do we have the right management team? Are we saving the right amount of money to handle for a rainy day issue? And the higher the ranking, and this is where the other benefit comes in, the lower your risk is for default. So when we're putting out bonds to invest in our buildings, which I'll talk about in a moment, we want to have the highest bond rating available, which reduces our interest rate. So that's why that bond rating is important. The second is a sustainable town budget. We have a certain amount of revenues coming in, and that's why I said we can afford within our known projected revenues. We have to forecast what those are, and we have to budget according to those. Right now, today, the town has an other post-employment benefits liability. If we had to pay everyone's health care now until the day they depart, and when I mean depart, 5 feet under, that's $47 million. That's a big number. Now, again, people are going to live another 40, 50, 60 years, but that's what the cost is today for all the current employees. So these are numbers we need to be aware of. The second is, or the other item here is to develop a 20-year forecast. Now, we are going to be in a process of borrowing a lot of money. The 20-year forecast is beneficial to looking at our long-term debt service. We're going to be building a new elementary school. The town's going to have to borrow, hopefully somewhere less than 40% of what the cost is going to be. The town's going to be building a new fire station. The town's going to be building a new police station shortly thereafter. We need 3 new fire engines that we have to purchase at a tune of, $1.8, $1.9 million. All of these things add up. We're going to have to borrow money for that. And again, that's why this statement is so important. With that, I can go through each item, but I've talked for a few minutes right now, and I'd like to know where you'd like me to go from here.
Sure. I mean, to us, I think the key is really having you probably work through some of these policy statements as we're digesting some of those pieces of what you'd like to present to us. So if you want to maybe go through and highlight what you feel some of the key points in these policies, and then we'll kind of open it up for discussion at that point.
Sure.
Unless anybody wants to go to a different angle.
I've got, everybody has a copy, correct?
We all have copies.
I've got some copies.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, thank you. Okay. The first item is, again, just focusing on a 20-year forecast. Now, the thing with forecast is that generally they're only good for a year or two if you're lucky. 5 years is great if you can get something out there, but it's based upon the assumptions. And you may have seen in the Carver paper this weekend is that for the North Carver Water District, there was listed out all the preliminary assumptions as we go into the next phase of that project. That's what we end up building our budgets upon. So a 20-year forecast, although the numbers are going to change every year, it gives us the opportunity to put down our assumptions and really think for the long term. But by no means do I think that what we're going to project now in 20 years is going to be the exact number in 20 years. It just gives us a framework to start to plan. with the budget message, local aid, state receipts. We've talked about those 4 choices. The next item is really trying not to have us postpone current expenses for future years. As we look into our free cash this year, we have about $660,000 in that account. About $250,000 to $300,000 is going to be eaten up for snow and ice removal. So that goes real quick. And for some other necessary things that we're better off paying for that out of this year's revenue than pushing it off to next year, because we're just pushing it off on our children. So that's what number 2 really has to deal with, is to focus on paying your expenses this year. Item number 3 has to do with, as on the town side, I'm looking to hire a new detective and a new resource officer, to find the funding for that. It's not just the salary that we have to look at. We have to look at the full life cycle cost. So we have to add in $18,000 just in healthcare for each one of those items, because that's really what is the more realistic number, let alone any overtime or any additional benefits that they may get. Those have to be included in there. So it's looking at the full life cycle cost. When we go to buy equipment, sometimes we can get away with buying a cheap fire engine and save $100,000 versus buying a quality built fire engine like a Pierce that's going to last 25 years, and it's going to reduce our operating costs. So it really requires us to take a look at all of those. Also in number 3, now I know the school receives annual grants that you receive every year. This is really focused more on one-time grants where they may only last for a year or 2, is that we really shouldn't be budgeting operating cost out of a temporary grant, because when the temporary grant goes away, how's it going to be funded? Is that going to mean a layoff or with then unemployment? Or is that going to mean that we have to cancel a program? Grants are very important, but we just need to balance them out based upon the life cycle cost. And speaking of unemployment, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this, whenever a municipality lays off somebody, they're not paid through the state unemployment insurance account. We as a town have to pay their unemployment insurance directly. So even though we save their salary, we're paying a large portion of it back to them. So sometimes to save $50,000, you have to lay off 2 people that each make $50,000 in order to save that first $50,000. Item number 4 has to do with general stabilization. And a town should always maintain a general stabilization base of about 5%. That'd be about $1.7 million. Right now, Carver has, I think, $957,000. Many years ago, I don't want to say many, but probably about 5 years ago, you had a few $1 million in your stabilization account. That was pulled down for rainy day issues.
2005.
2005?
So we had the multi-million dollars. It was pulled out before I got here, so that's how come I know the date.
So you didn't benefit from that either. So
Nope.
We need to take a look at that, and we need to build that back up. I will be presenting as part of the free cash is to put some money back into the stabilization, because as we go to improve our bond rating and make sure that we're financially solvent, is we need to show we're starting to save again, even if it's a little bit. We need to do that. We're not going to get up to the $3 million in 1 year or 4 years or 5 years, but we have to show strides that we're heading in that direction. A lot of this is discipline. A lot of what the bond rating agencies look at is, are you doing the same thing year over year to improve yourself? You may not be able to solve it right away, but are you taking those strides? The next item is number 5. This has to do with maintaining your infrastructure. And for those of us that are fortunate to own a house, every 25, 30 years we have to replace the roof. Maybe we can get by a year or 2, but after that the shingles start to break and all of a sudden the roof leaks. And if we still don't do it, then we have some severe structural damage and our house no longer has the value. Municipalities have a long history of pushing off some of its infrastructure, and as a result of that, it comes back to haunt us. The school's done a really good job of maintaining the elementary school with Band-Aids, bubble gum, and duct tape. But it's time that we need to build a new one, and it just so happens at the same time we need to build a police station and a fire station too. So that's a huge hit on the town, where if these things were staggered a little bit better, it would be more easily absorbed. The other piece that I've looked at here, and I briefly mentioned this, there was a plan to roll all new personal property tax into a building stabilization fund. And again, I've modified that a little bit so it goes into a capital stabilization fund. Out of the capital stabilization fund, it will first fund the debt service that needs to be done, and then fund, with whatever delta remains for that year, some of the capital outlay items that need to be purchased, whether it's a school bus or a dump truck or computers, that we'll be able to continuously save for both. My concern with the other program was that the capital outlay, those pieces of equipment, we're not going to have a funding source, and I think this is the way of making that happen.
So just for a point of clarity, so the building stabilization fund that was established by the town and town meeting, this is what you're referring to? Is it that?
That is correct, yeah. So to expand the scope of that and to continue to put the money into it, and I think the personal property tax was a very smart decision to put in there, because our personal property tax is like a roller coaster. 3 years ago it was $700,000. This year it'll be about $300,000. A few years before that it was, under $50,000. Next year it could be under $50,000 too. So to build an operating base based upon a one-year hit where National Grid or NSTAR comes in and builds all those new power lines or their big transformer facility, and the next year, you don't have that flexibility. And again, this is to build up a fund that's equal to about 4% of our base, because that's really, for good financial management, that's what needs to be invested on average into our infrastructure, and that infrastructure again is either buildings, roads, or equipment. I've mentioned number 6. Number 7, this is the unfunded liability. It's a $49.6 million number that grows at an annual rate about $3 or $4 million a year. We'd have to put that amount of money into it every year just to maintain a status quo. Where are we going to come up with $3 or $4 million? We're not. So we have to start to look at other ways of reducing this down and to start to develop a plan to attack it. This is a big number, 1.5 times your budget. This needs to be addressed, but by no means can it be addressed immediately. But going back to the bond rating agencies, we have to address it by putting together a plan and taking small incremental steps to address it. Not to solve it, but to address it. Item number 8 goes back to creating this capital stabilization fund, where we put in one-time revenue, new personal property growth, internal debt that rolls off, that we just plug back into that. And then item number 9 really says that, this town unfortunately needs to continue to tax to the max allowed under Prop 2.5, the max levy of 2.5% every year. We've got a $49 million liability. We've got to build a school, a fire station, etc. We're having budget challenges right now. We can't cut the taxes until we address our operating base. And this is really just a point to hone in that. So when people say, well, let's only allocate 2% of the tax growth this year. Well, excuse me, you're really biting off your nose on that one, because the issue's so big that you just can't stop funding that 2.5% until you get all these things taken care of. So the intent is with this document is to run this through the selectmen. They adopted this on February 11th. Run it through the Finance Committee, the Capital Outlay Committee, the School Committee. and also then to bring it to town meeting and try to have this as the framework. So no matter who's in my chair, no matter who's in Liz's chair or Pat's, is that this is the framework that we need to operate our town as a business. There's a lot of room to maneuver in here. It's not that dictated as to what you can and can't do, but it provides the framework. I've also put together a committee, the financial advisory committee, if you will, to the town administrator, which includes the superintendent, a member of the school committee, a member of the board of selectmen, a member of the finance committee, a member of the capital outlay committee, the town accountant, and the business manager. And we've had at least 2 meetings, and we modified some of the language based upon comments that we received in those meetings. We'll continue to have those meetings just so that there's, a transparent communication between all the key stakeholders as everything goes forward.
Great, thank you. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
I have a couple. Just, I guess my first question would be: is that, particularly looking for a vote on this as the selectmen did, or is this just something you're presenting to these committees as far as showing where you'd like to move forward with?
Ideally, I'd like us all to be on the same page. Am I looking for a vote tonight? No, not necessarily. As part of having that financial advisory team, I wanted to bounce this off of people and get comments, and Barry was there, and Liz, and Pat, so that we can have a document, a framework that we can all tentatively agree to try to guide the town. So at some point, yes, I'd like a vote. I'd like the groups that I mentioned, the selectmen who've done it, finance, capital outlay, school committee, and then town meeting to adopt this as a resolution, just so that, we have the framework to operate.
I guess I made a couple comments, and you answered some of them as we went through this. On number 5, I had questioned how, because that would require a town meeting vote in order to change what's established right now for the stabilization fund. Mm-hmm. So you sort of answered that in that. And the only thing I would ask is maybe on 3D, where you had said, that possibly the language where it was temporary as opposed to maybe being misconstrued a different way, that adding that language into 3D, that it's speaking specifically to temporary grants. And then I think I'd have to hear a lot more about number 6. As you had said, that you weren't specific, and I think to feel more comfortable with that, I think I'd like a little more clarity on that. But I think, as I've spoken to you a few times about this, I think you've got some great ideas here to start moving us forward in the right direction, and I think a lot of it sounds really good.
Thank you.
Well, and James, to your point, I think we can look at it a couple ways. We can look at this tonight. He shared this information with us, and we can take it home, digest it. We can have a discussion today, and again, take it home, digest it, and come back for a vote, perhaps at our next meeting. Whatever the committee feels comfortable with, as it's been shared to us. And like you said, there's a kind of 6 still needs some vetting through that process and kind of get those where it needs to be, so we can have a grasp, because I think clearly that's one that affects directly the school committee, where Liz and the town manager administrator would have that kind of dual leadership role. So I think that's important. I think too, for us to look at, clearly the school committee has kind of guidelines coming from the state, making sure that these sync together so that guidelines that we get from the state to do our jobs match what goes here. So I think some of that still needs to be done. So I appreciate the information. I think it's important that we continue to get that out, and then perhaps have a vote at our upcoming meeting to have a chance to really digest this and sort through some of these details that need to be completed.
And I think the thing that I like the most, Mike, is that you're doing this with every committee, and you're pulling all the right committees and the right people together, so everybody's getting on the same page. And I think that's something that's going to make a big difference.
I think that's one of my biggest tasks in this town, is that there's been so much of it, I'm going to call it like it is, a political divide. You're either on this side or you're on that side. And we had a long talk about that, Lance, in the interview process, is that I need to help pull everybody together. I think everyone wants to move the town forward. Mm-hmm. People have different views of how that happens, and little twists and colors and changes that are here. But I think generally 90% of the people, if not more, have a common goal that they want Carver to be a better community and survive in the long term, and provide the resources that it needs for its services it's supposed to provide. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, I thank you for what you put forth, man. Appreciate it.
So we still have another meeting.
Lance, I just want to say
Yes, Mike.
thanks for being here, Mike, 'cause I really appreciate, first of all, the symbolism of you being at the school committee meeting, the town administrator, so I do thank you for laying it out. It was good to read this over the weekend, but then a little further explanation from you is helpful, but I think it would be great too, James and all, to hear from, not necessarily tonight on this, but when you contact us, the population, to, kind of voice what you think as far as this goes. I know we all want the town to be successful, there's no doubt about it, and I think this is a great, moving forward, fiscally prudent, which I think is definitely necessary. When I sat out in the crowd 10 years ago, the same message was out there when the first superintendent was here long ago.
Marty.
Yes. So, I mean, the things have not gotten better since then, and it's even more dire now. So we definitely need that framework. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Excuse me, Lance.
Jim, yes.
Thank you for coming. However, being on the school committee, we have a sub-policy committee, and I'd like to just stay within the guidelines of how the school committee should function.
Sure.
So I think the sub-policy committee should get together, discuss it, bring it to the school committee, and just follow the normal protocol. Excellent, thank you. Sure.
Thank you, Gina. Any other questions? Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Hope you feel better.
Thank you.
So next, under communications, in the school committee packet, and it's been on the website for parents, there was a warning out, and I'm going to let Mike Schultz talk to you about this.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening, Mr. Schultz.
Basically, about 3 weeks ago, this was brought to our attention. There was I'll give you kind of a quick background. Our wrestling coach at our wrestling program, we have a high school program, we have a youth program in town, and it's run both by Mark Stasiowski. And he was at a meet about 3 weeks ago, and he was called into a room with all the coaches, and it was brought to his attention that there's a gentleman by the name of Manny Whalen who has a Facebook page who is recruiting wrestlers of all ages to do almost like an underground wrestling club, and he rents out hotels, and really a sketchy situation. So we found it about 3 weeks ago briefly, and then the MIA shortly put out an MIA, what they call a public safety announcement. It's basically the statement that we put on our website and put out to parents. It's just warning parents to be aware of anybody soliciting students to wrestle or be part of a club. I did speak with one of the executive directors of the MIA last week. He said we have no other information other than it was a Facebook page, and a gentleman by the name, again, Manny Whalen, was soliciting students mostly through Facebook, but they are calling kids if they get your number and information. Just another sort of scary way our students are being kind of drawn in through social media. If anybody does contact anybody, there is information. There's the Massachusetts Internet Crime Against Children Task Force is working on this. My understanding is the Facebook page was shut down temporarily, and then it's back up under a different alias, is what I was told. I don't know if it's still existing or not. The only caution I would give the public is that there are a tremendous amount of clubs and organizations out there for youth sports right now. AAU teams, club soccer, basketball, football. And unfortunately, youth sports has become a business, as a lot of us know. These guys make a lot of money doing this. And I'm not shooting down clubs and organizations. What I caution you is that most of the good clubs and the AAU clubs that are out there have pretty extensive websites. They've got very good reputations. So if your child is being solicited because they saw him at a club game or a tournament, do your homework before you sign up. If you have any questions, we do have a pretty good network in my office with clubs and people that we know. If you don't recognize a club that's out there, certainly contact the office, contact the superintendent, contact me. I do have a lot of connections with certainly soccer, basketball, football clubs that are out there. And just be careful with what you're signing your kids up for, and certainly tryouts and stuff. They pop up all spring for soccer. They'll pop up throughout the year for basketball and so forth. So. Just a word of caution, and
Thank you, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Schultz.
It's quite a scary thing, and we just wanted we sent home the notes with schools. We did an all-call through the middle high school, and it's on our website. but this was just another opportunity for it to be on television several times. So thank you for taking time to explain it to us, Mike. Thank you. And then the next one is just a list, and Mr. Dunn did a good job of talking about some of the more immediate things. But Anne Marie, as always, makes our March to May, what all the things we're doing, and they are listed here, so you can plan as school committee members if you would like to attend, and they are always on the calendar, top right-hand side of the website. So just to pay attention to what's coming up. There are a lot of them. There's teacher conferences, March Madness, the Grade 5 Science Fair is March.
Where are they listed, though? Is there?
You don't have. This is in the school.
Can they find the information online?
It's up in our calendar on the website.
Oh.
Yeah, it's right there in the calendar. You just put more events, and then you'll see them all listed. Okay.
With that, we'll move on to reports.
Yes, and under instructional leadership, we have recognition.
We do, a very special one.
Mr. Neep.
Good evening, everyone. I have the honor of recognizing one of our students for outstanding accomplishment. And actually, it's an outstanding accomplishment in two ways. We traditionally recognize those students who score an 800 in any section, which is a perfect score, in any section of the SAT exam. And we had one student this year who was able to score an 800 in two different areas of the SAT. First, that student scored an 800 in critical reading, and also the student scored an 800 on the U.S. history subject test, which is an outstanding accomplishment. And as a way of introducing him, I'm going to read a little bit from a recommendation that I wrote from him. Don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll do a brief excerpt from the recommendation, and then we'll have him come forward to recognize him. The student will receive an award at Convocation, which is our award ceremony for seniors, which is in May, so we will recognize him again. Scott Strutsky is a talented and dedicated student. He has taken the most challenging courses that we have to offer at Carver Middle High School, including several AP courses. He has a true thirst for knowledge. He's always challenging himself to live up to our school motto of be respectful, be responsible, be the best you can be. Scott has a true passion for history and politics. He's honest, reliable, a person of integrity, who will graduate in June as one of Carver Middle High School's finest students. Please welcome and recognize Scott Strutsky for his 2 perfect scores on the SAT exams in critical reading and U.S. history. And Scott, come forward.
You don't get a chance to be perfect. No, you can't leave. I'm the superintendent. Very often in your life. So you should really relish this. You have done outstanding work in the school committee, and I are very, very proud of you, and I know your family is. Congratulations, Scott.
Absolutely.
Congratulations again, Scott.
Thank you.
So I usually make a personnel update, and we have some good life changes for some of our most important central office employees, the people who handle our finances day in and out. Linda Dorgan is retiring on the last day of March, and we have hired her. We've hired her replacement to be Tammy Varaka, who's currently our payroll administrator, and she'll move over to Linda's position, who is the business office administrative assistant. And then we have hired a new person to replace Tammy, who is Casey Christopher. She lives in Middleborough, and she comes to us from a hospital in Milton, and she's been doing a very similar job there. She started with us today, so we could have a little overlap in training. And so you will be talking to her on the phone if you're a teacher, for sure, and we want to welcome her. And then Pat's going to leave us on June 30th, and he's had a long tenure in Carver, and it's been my pleasure to work with him these last 5 years, and so we took it very seriously. And I'm going to let James O'Brien tell you how we have hired our new person, and he's going to come up and just tell you a little tiny bit about himself.
I'll try to be as brief as possible. It was a nice makeup on the committee, and I think there were a lot of really qualified people. I think that was the one thing that stood out to me, is that the people that did come in and apply were all had excellent qualifications. But I think what really stood out to me was the business experience was sort of across the board with all of the candidates. But one of the things that really stood out to me was Peter's willingness to be more involved in the academic side of it and understanding the academic side of it and the evaluations and more of the whole process as opposed to that aspect. And not to take away what any others may have brought to that, I think that part of what he had just really stood out, and he seemed to rise to the top with qualifications to the whole committee. And I think we're doing a great service to this town in hiring him, and would love to introduce Mr. Peter Gray to come forward.
Welcome, Peter.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. After that introduction, how can I go any higher than that? But just briefly to give you a little bit about background, I started my career many years ago. I won't say how many. I worked both in state government as well as nonprofits, and my educational career started about 10 years ago. I've worked both in regional school districts in Maine. My Massachusetts career started here in 2010 when I was hired as the assistant superintendent of schools for the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District up on the North Shore. About 11 months into my career, the superintendent retired, and I served as interim superintendent, going through a lot of the unfunded mandates that you speak about. I was involved with everything from the new education evaluation system to hiring a number of leadership team members that had left, and very proud to say that at Hamilton-Wenham they still reside there and have been doing a great job. I was very pleased when the superintendent called me and said that she would like to meet me and offer me the position here in Carver, because I think there's a lot of great things going on in Carver, and I'm really looking forward to trying to fill the shoes that Pat has left behind, or will be leaving behind. We compared shoe sizes, and I think he's a little bigger shoe than I will be, but I hope to fill it. In reference to Mr. O'Brien's comments about going over and above, just to give you a little insight, as a race to the top district at Hamilton-Wenham, I was invited to, and I believe probably the only business administrator to go through the 18-month National Institute of School Leadership's leadership program, which exposed me to working with and talking to school administrators who struggle every day to try to find the resources and to institute some of the many mandates that are coming across, whether it's 21st century skills, Common Core, educator evaluation. Just completed that in December, and take great pride in the fact that while I may not have resided in a classroom, certainly feel that I have a good working knowledge, that both on the financial side as well as the educational side. So once again, thank you very much. I'm extremely excited to be coming here. I can't wait for July 1st to start, because I really think that the superintendent and the team that you have here is an outstanding group of people who ultimately work towards making sure that the kids here in Carver get the best education possible, and I want to contribute to that as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to starting soon.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, now all the fun's done. Because as I told the teachers last Monday when I went to the middle high school first, then to the elementary school, and although we as administrators have known for quite some time that we have a very difficult financial year, it's even more difficult to face the teachers who potentially will lose their jobs, and your children who will suffer from that loss. So this isn't anything that I would have ever dreamed in my career that I would have to think about eliminating 24 positions from our school system. It's the most difficult piece of the work I do for you. Meredith, can you help me with the presentation? And I know you're going to have questions, and I have 3 presentations, so at the end of each one, if you have questions, so if write them down so you don't forget it. And if you didn't get a copy of this one, I think there's still copies out in the hallway. So, every year we prepare a level service budget, and what that means is that we presume that we will continue to offer to every child the same educational experience that they had the previous year, hopefully a little bit better. It also presumes that we will offer the same programs, that by and large we will maintain the same number of staff. Some people leave for whatever reason, retirement, their family moves on for career purposes. But in the end of the day, the 1,722 students that we serve this year would have the same education next year. That's what we're trying to do. This means no growth. We desperately need a health teacher at the middle high school. We've been trying to get this back for the last 5 years. The last time we had one was in 2007. So we desperately need this. This also includes projected increases in expenses included to this budget, because unfortunately, although our budget has maintained the same level of support from the Chapter 70 from the Massachusetts government, our expenses have gone up every year. So it's very difficult to maintain level service when you get increased expenses and level funding, or worse than level funding. So these are just to maintain. We're not trying to grow anything here, unfortunately. We're growing a gap instead of something productive. So we have budget building blocks, and that's, you start off with your projected expenses and your projected revenues, and then we have something called revenue offsets, the way we can reduce some of the expenses by an offset through a process I'll explain to you. So this budget is going to show you something by a cost center. And for the first cost center, it is central office. And the central office budget of 2014 was $5,757,067. And projected for 2015, you can see we have a $230,930 or 4.01 increase. Central office takes care of all the benefits for all employees, from our custodians and paraprofessionals to teachers and food service workers and bus drivers. So it is, the insurance and health insurance is predicted to be $192,000 for the school department employees. Then, as Mr. Milanowski said, we share the Plymouth County retirement between town employees and school employees. Teachers pay their own, but all other support staff pay a portion of their own, and then we as employers pay part of their Plymouth County retirement. And that's going up by $40,000 for the school share of that. We also have an increase in FICA and no offset from ed jobs bills. Several years ago, we got some money from the government to offset the financial crisis of 2008. We spread it out over 3 years, which you were allowed to do by paying health benefits. So we had that offset, but we no longer have that. It's zero because we expended it all. We reduced the budget for 3 years, or the expenses to the budget. Then we predict a slight reduction in vocational and agricultural tuitions for next year. We'll know for sure. They have to tell us by April 1st if they're going to an agricultural school. Transportation. We level funded transportation. This is a presumption that we're going to run all our buses to and from in the morning and to and from in the afternoon. No increase. And we do save quite a bit of money by owning our own buses. We are in the bottom half of the state average for transportation. So it still continues to be a cost-saving item. Special education. And on the face of this is an enormous jump, 147%. But this number, 581,445, was after the offset of circuit breaker last year. So but we have to compare it budget year to budget year. So this was our actual to the budget last year. We're predicting $1.4,037,663, but this will be offset by circuit breaker. Private schools are not limited on tuition increases. Private schools can just decide they're going to charge you $1,000, $12,000 more. Public school, particularly the collaboratives, they have a limit on which they can raise their tuition. So we enroll as many students as we can in our special education collaboratives, but there are some services that are needed we can't provide through collaboratives, so we need to send students to private placements to get the best education they can possibly get, because that's our job, to give every child the best education they can possibly have. Then some are increase in services, transportation, time at the facility, and equipment. Just small incremental change of things that we just have to pay for.
Liz, before we move on,
Yeah.
just apples to apples, what's general ballpark on what we think
Circuit breaker.
circuit breaker is going to be?
Coming up.
Okay, while we were looking at that.
Right.
It would be easier.
I think it'll be easier to understand after I get down to the bottom.
Okay.
Okay, it's about $500,000.
Okay.
So custodial and maintenance, even though we're living on a very short fuse for that elementary building, and we have spent about $500,000 on it in the past 4 years. We're just level funding all maintenance to this amount. This is a risk because, of course, the buildings get older every day, including the middle high school, which people call the new building, but it's actually 27 years old. So this is a risk in our budget, but we decided it's a risk worth taking. Technology is a decrease. We reorganized and upgraded our infrastructure this year, so it had a higher cost. But next year, we're going to take a decrease in the budget so that we're predicting almost 30% less spending in technology. We do have a warrant article for more iPads, which comes out of the capital outlay budget. Doesn't come out of the school operating budget. The cost by school, I find this to be pretty amazing. We have 800.
It's amazing, a word I would use.
Yeah, appalling is a very good word.
Yes.
Is we manage to buy every single thing we put in a classroom, every single thing, for 850 plus students with $137,000. So you can very quickly see we're spending a very little amount of money to provide educational supplies. And another sheet later on will show you how much we've cut at this over the years. It used to be more than triple this at one point. Now, this is because we've had to go in very deep. I was talking with a citizen who said, well, you down to the bone and now you're hitting the marrow. And they're right. The middle high school, it has one more grade, and their things, as the bigger they get, the more things cost. So that's the middle high school budget is $242.55 per student, but again, it's almost level funded. Athletics, little bit of increase. Transportation and officials, we're in a different league than we were in previous years, so this is what counts for that cost. Salaries, from budget from 2014, the actual was $13,870,481. However, the budgeted amount was more last year, but we had an extraordinary amount of retirees that we weren't expecting, so the actual ended up being much less. So
this is, and the new budget is pre any retirements as well.
This does not include any retirements whatsoever. I know I have 2, but at this point, we don't put the offsets in. When you want to make a clean, transparent budget, you put in what it all adds up to. I do want to say that Carver teachers took 2 zeros in a row in their contract, as did all of our employees. I took a 5% decrease to make it work 1 year. So they've given a lot. 3rd year, the teachers gave back 45 days of their contractual raise so that we wouldn't have to fire another teacher. And so when the new contract came, it looked like the economy was turning around. Last year, they took a 0 in the first year. They got 1.5 this calendar year. And next year, they're to get 2%. So over 5 years, they had less than 3.5% raise. And there isn't a town around us that didn't give at least 6% in that time period, and most a lot more. So I think our teachers, all of our employees, have been working with us. Teachers get a cost of living, that's what I'm talking about, the 2%, but they also can earn more money by having more education. So they move across the salary schedule, and then they move up in years in the salary schedule, which there's an increment for each year. But given all that, of the 2%, there's just an additional 1.46 that accounts for steps, which is years, and lanes, which is education. And those are all in contracts. So here's where I get to the offsets. So in the budgeted year of 2014, we budgeted $21,368,292, but we offset it by $563,478 of circuit breaker. And a lot of people probably don't even know what I'm talking about. So when you have extraordinary costs for an individual special education student, which is cost more than 4 times the foundation budget. That's this budget which allows a certain expenditure per student. And just for easy math, let's call it $10,000. So if it goes more than $40,000 for one student, then circuit breaker applies, which the Massachusetts state government has a fund for circuit breaker, and you can collect the difference. Say it was $60,000 was the cost for a student. You collect the difference on the $20,000. But very rarely do they fund it 100%. It's been as low as 40% of $20,000. So, you know, $8,000 you get for spending $20,000 more. So that we are getting a higher rate of return this year. Patrick?
About 75.
75. So in some ways we luck. So we'll get 75% of that $20,000 for this budget year. So we offset that number in 2014, and that's what brought it down to $500,000. And I want to be very careful because our director of special education works harder than anyone I know to keep these costs contained. But there's certain things, no matter how hard you work, it still goes up.
Well, and I think for those that had the opportunity to hear her present, clearly the work that's been done to bring students back into our district and provide those programs within in-house to cut costs was pretty evident. So it's clear that she's worked hard to make sure we've stayed as low as we can on that number.
Then several years ago, when we had another budget crisis, which they just come yearly, I said, well, we could consider school choice. School choice is up to the school committee every year to accept or reject school choice, which allows people from other towns to come to Carver on whatever the school committee and the superintendent decide would make a difference. We could do it without costing us any more money. So where a class might have had 18 kids, and if you take 10 more children in, and it's either 1 or 2 more in each classroom, so it didn't matter, you know, as far as no more payment for teachers. And if that child were to have extraordinary special education needs, the money follows the child. The sending district has to pay for it. So we decided to see how school choice would work in kindergarten only. And this we're finishing our third year of school choice. And it does bring in a solid $95,000. Now, those children can stay here their whole educational career, and their siblings can come. But we have a free kindergarten in some of our surrounding towns. You have to pay if you go full day. So we have some usage just for kindergarten only, and then they go back to their home district in first grade. But we also have people who just come here and stay here. So when we take in 10 or 12, that's $5,000 each. So we're now maintaining about a $95,000 or $90,000 school choice revenue. It was an opportunity for a revenue that showcased our very good program in kindergarten. Our children are 80% reading at or above grade level by the time they finish kindergarten. You don't get much better than that, in these days. So then the state, even though they didn't give us a percentage increase on our Chapter 70 money, which is the money that comes to us from the state, they gave us $25 per student. 25 more than we had before. 25? $25. $25.
For the additional, yes. Yeah.
Yes. So, so when that all added up, we were able to offset the original budget for 2014, which was then, it was 22-something million. We were able to offset it with these other revenues. So this is the actual budget for 2014. So now, with adding up all our expenses from all those cost centers, the actual budget for 2015 is $22,516,093. It's an increase of $1.1 million, or almost 1.2. It's a 5.59%. And as Mr. Milanowski said, health insurance going up by 5%. We saw that there's an addition, almost all those cost centers went up. So to have the total cost go up by only 5.59 is pretty good. So then, if you look at the next one, you will see that what we are predicting we can offset that big number by. One is that we know for sure that our retiree health insurance did not go up, and we had put in the original budget a slight increase. So we can apply $22,082 as an offset to the 2015, because it did not go up as we predicted. It went up by 0%. We know what we're going to get from circuit breaker, because we get it. Another thing is you get it a year behind. This year's circuit breaker was based on last year's special ed costs. And school choice, we're being very conservative here and saying 90,000. Maybe we'll lose one student because it's 5,000 each. And then with the additional Chapter 70, the $25 per child, 42. So we know that we can offset this budget by $666,820. But of the $1.2 million, we're now left with a $913,000, $125 budget shortfall.
I'm just curious on the two pages why one summary is 22.5 and then the other one's 22.9. What's the difference there?
Might have been me. Did I?
Well, 400,000 makes a big difference, so I'm just curious. From here.
Oh, it's the offset applied.
Oh, okay.
Offset's applied.
And you've added those back in.
Yeah.
So the 700,000 was added back into that.
Right.
Okay.
So projected revenues, we know for sure from the governor's budget that we're going to get $9,688,439. The budget from the state comes three ways: from the governor, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. The last few years, they basically adopted the governor's budget. They may move things around, but they basically adopted. So, and then that's our little extra $25 per student. So we know from Chapter 70 monies, this is the number that we'll get. Although they haven't passed the final one, I'm not expecting a windfall. So we don't have a firm number yet from the town. We'll get it in the next few weeks. So we're predicting a 0 increase for the town. So with Chapter 70 being that number, Town of Carver, we don't know, but if it were level, the additional money for Chapter 70 not included circuit breaker and school choice offset, we end up with this $22,900, $299 level service budget with the $913,125 gap. Possible sources to offset the gap. If I have more retirement letters, I have 2 retirement letters. I have pleaded with the teachers. I'm not asking you to retire, but if you know you were going to retire and you haven't told me, just tell me, so that I don't go and lay off some teacher and then have to go back at the end because they retire. You know, it's a hard decision. It's like you're ending your career. So people have a hard time with this decision. I've been telling everybody I know I'm retiring on June 30th, 2016, because if I say it, then I'll have to do it. But it's a very hard decision. So a retirement can offset almost 2 jobs if they take the family plan, because that's $18,000 plus their salary, and then you can usually save a brand new young teacher who is not at the same level. But then there's unemployment if you lay them off. But a retirement, you know, with 3 retirements, you can sometimes save 4 or 5 jobs, just depending on how the chips fall. So if nothing changes from the revenue projections, there will be 12 teachers at each school will be laid off, a total of 24 teachers. And as a result, although we haven't made any permanent decisions because we don't have any retirement information we can count on, kindergarten will remain the same, but grades 1 through 5 would average between 29 and 34 students per class. And I assume that's why you all are here tonight. And grades 6 and 7 will increase, that should be 12. Mark that out, 6, 12. I don't know how I got 7 there. Unfortunately, I've had to revise this like every other day because more places come in. 6, 12. Most classes will increase in size. Some will average between 29 or 30. So it's not pretty anywhere you look. So on this,
As a comparison, where are we right now?
we have a couple of 5th grade classes at 28, 29.
Actually,
Second grade, but 5th grade has 27.
5th grade has 24, 25.
Okay, so we have a couple approaching this, but on average, most of the classes are 25 or below. I mean, that's what we aim for. And in the high school, we have some nice sized classes, 18, 19, 20. You know, when you get up to higher level languages and math, they sort out, fewer kids take those classes. We don't want to lose any programs either, so.
So this particular scenario doesn't affect curriculum?
The way we're looking at it now, there would be some modest loss, in program. Loss of flexibility of scheduling students, for sure. But there are multiple ways to approach this level of cutting into your staff. But I'm going to tell you how long I've been in this business. This is 44 years. And and my experience in Carver proves it true, once I cut a program, I've never been able to put it back, ever.
We've seen that with our health position, yes.
Yes. So it seems, and then there's the problem of you cut a program and children are still in school and they have to do something during that time, and you become warehousing of children instead of teaching children. So although it's very, very unattractive, raising class size keeps the most options open for your children's education over the long haul, and doesn't do as much damage to their education. I mean, this is a fact. It's not saying that I want this to be true, but it is true that class size really has very little impact on long-term education, as long as you don't repeat it for year after year after year. If it's 1 or 2 years, you should usually survive it. But it's nothing I would recommend. I'm just telling you what it says. But otherwise, we do wholesale chopping, and we really can't afford to, because you have needs, and the children, some children only come to school for music and art. You know, it's particularly at the middle high school. If they're an at-risk kid, you get them to do their academics, but they wouldn't be interested in even being at school unless they had something they really liked. And then we'd be warehousing kids in the cafeteria if we cut those things. So it's a few more in their class is worth it to save it for a year or 2. So, but we're not canceling out any options. We've met many times already. We will meet probably many, many, many more times as information becomes available to us about retirements. But right now, the only thing we have to pin this on is retirements. And this is all based on if we get level funding from the town. You know, it could get worse if we didn't.
Sure. With that, thank you for that presentation, Liz. I'll open it up to the committee for questions or discussion, please.
I have some questions, Liz, on the summary total pages. Kind of going, Lance, to what you were asking. I'm not sure if I fully understand what you're saying there.
I'm going to let Pat and I will work together on this. He did crunched the numbers for me, but I could have typed it wrong. So, you going to help me out, Pat?
What's your question, James?
My question is on that first page with the budget for 214 and 215, it's 21,368 and 22,516, and on the next page it's 21,368, which stays the same, and the 22,9. And where's that difference for the 15 budget come from?
My sense is that's just probably an error.
Because which is the accurate statement then? Is it
It should have been 21.9.
The second page.
Yeah.
So it's the 22.9 is the accurate statement, the 22.5 is inaccurate.
The 22,516 was actually a number that was and I can remember reducing part of the 22,900 by a couple of these adjustments. And so I think that number erroneously got in there. What we need to do is the 22,900,299 is the number.
Okay, so that's the accurate number.
That's the number.
Yeah, we were working with multiple reductions, and I just didn't copy and paste the right one there.
I was just hoping it was the other way around.
So then, to that extent, is the circuit breaker estimated right now, or is that a guaranteed 510?
Because we work on the year after, right?
That's a number that will not go down.
Will not go down, right, but could go up a little bit. If the previous year was 563, I think, or
The previous year was 563. We had a little extra come through at the end of the year, and that happens sometimes. When the administrator at the DOE carves out circuit breaker for the state, he does a very conservative estimate. And so his estimate always will never go down, but it might go up. Just like when they did some 9C cuts and they had to take some of the circuit breaker back,
we didn't have to give any back. He is very conservative with that. So at the end of the year, if nothing else changes, we get about a 75% reimbursement, and if nothing else changes, there's a little bit extra, and that always comes our way too.
And then we would definitely apply it if we got a little bit
and
extra.
that gets distributed late. So what we've got is the 510 is a solid number.
Okay.
It's not going to go down.
Okay. The other question I just had was, I know that it is gone, but I know also last year and in other years we've looked at this and it's been $650 and it's been ways that we've found ways to actually cover it. I know that's different this year, and I know that the Ed Jobs is a part of that.
Well,
what was an estimated figure for the Ed Jobs that we've received recently? Like, how much impact did that have in the amount?
The Ed Jobs, we want to go back to the to really the ARA funds, the American Recovery and Investment Act. That was Ed Jobs was actually part of that. But if we go back that far, we got it was several $100,000 that we had use of over a couple of years of what they called the ARA grants, and we used that. But Ed Jobs was one of them. Our Ed Jobs was about $630,000. We had three years of use out of that. And what the Ed Jobs bill was for saving jobs. And we could do that by paying for the health insurance plans of many of the people, of many of the staff, okay? Because if we were to utilize grants sometimes to actually pay benefits directly, we have to pay an additional 9% to the mass retirement.
So we don't do that.
And we don't do that. So that's why we chose to use the Ed Jobs to pay for the health insurance of those jobs we were trying to save. So we fully got 3 years out of that. And the few years before that, we got a couple of good years out of the ARA grants. And then last year too, which didn't really get put in here, but we had an inordinate amount of retirements, which was about 14, and we were over $200,000 in salaries saved because we will obviously have somebody that goes out on top step and we hire at a lower step. So we were $200,000 there. So a lot of our revenues have not been repeating. We've had and we're going to do more about this at another session, but even the Chapter 70s in the last 2 years have been the absolute minimum of $25 per student. And for us, that's $43,000. And that's
The increase.
That's the increase that we got in chapter 70. And and again, at the same time, the revenue from the town remained relatively stable. So in losing several revenue sources, and those not repeating, and the Chapter 70 is going down to bare minimum, it's really impacted us. Besides the other things that are happening with health insurance, at least, sometimes it's modest increases, it's like 5%. And the Plymouth County retirement, I budgeted 5% for Plymouth County retirement in this budget, and the $40,000 that you saw a few pages back, that was an additional increment that we had to pay. The original one was $36,000. And then with another 40, it was really $76,000. So our increase to the school's share of its obligation to Plymouth County retirement was 1.5 times the increase in the Chapter 70. I mean, just things like this, and you just can't make progress.
And to your point, that somehow magically we've come together, but mostly it was ARA and secondary. Like last year, we just had this surprise bunch of retirements.
Yeah.
But now we don't even have that many listed on the top of the list where people are at the age or experience level to retire. I mean, if we got 5, I would be amazed. I really think 3 and 4 is going to be more like what it actually is.
So I guess to allude to what Mr. Milanowski was mentioning earlier, that this is like a worst-case scenario presented right here. There is ways that we can chip away at that.
Not many.
But to my point, not really that much, because there's not much that's going to alter that. And I think to make sure that everybody's clear that early retirements, and even retirements in general, unless you cut that position, which will then increase your class sizes, means you still have to hire somebody at a lower rate. So you're still paying for that position in order to keep it one way or another.
And it also depends on the position. If it's a specialty position, you're not saving that much because you still got to get that key position.
You know, and we are down to essential personnel, really. So I'd point you, well, I don't have any more questions.
Yeah, I have a couple questions and a couple points. I noticed the fuel prices, budget was flat. I mean, what are we anticipating for, transportation budget was flat. What are we anticipating for gas prices? I mean, is it expecting to stay the same?
The gas prices, we do a collaborative bid with Town Hall. We get a state bid list price on gasoline, and one of the reasons that we can also keep our transportation, our non-salary transportation budget relatively flat is again the generosity of the town with the capital outlay is in giving us new buses. So when we get newer buses, we retire or trade in older buses. So our costs of maintaining them actually pretty much stay flat, because we're not putting money into old buses, and the new ones we put no money into.
So that's not an area you expect to surprise us later?
No, and remember, we don't pay tax on our gasoline.
Yes, good.
Because we're, tax exempt. But in the state bid list doesn't fluctuate as much as a consumer purchase does. So we pay a lot less for fuel.
And the new buses get better mileage too.
So I just have a couple more.
Go ahead.
And the technology, it's great to have a great audience. I appreciate everybody being here. I know it's on cable every month, but this is a true audience. The technology budget's going down, and I don't think our technology is acceptable. Obviously, you don't too. I know you agree with me. But you hear other towns increasing their technology. For example, laptops, $1.2 million in another town. That might be a capital outlay at that town, but nonetheless, we're trying to compete with other towns. So it's one thing to be even staying the same, but we're going backwards. So
Well, I can say that, this year, with the $100,000 from capital outlay, we put into infrastructure so we have seamless connectivity throughout all of our buildings, including here, wireless. And we bought 180 iPads. We're now up to 237, Meredith, iPads in the district. And with this capital outlay, 100,000, we plan to buy another 180, so that the idea is that you have 1.5 times the number of children you have in any one grade level. It's not where we want to be, but we are so many hundreds of thousands miles better than we were the previous year that I feel like we made this giant leap this year. And that we'll make another giant leap next year. But
as we get through this.
Yeah, but because capital funds don't come from Chapter 70 and town revenues. Usually it's the town has borrowed against the levy limit to provide capital projects. So although it's not one-to-one, but we do now have the ability to have one-to-one, and we have the ability for every person to use 2 devices, every person in the school, which we couldn't have handled that before. So
thank you for that.
It's not ideal, but we're making progress.
Good. And I'm just going to have a few more things. I know we're getting late, but and I don't mean to get everybody riled up. You know that. I like to be civil. I like to be civil as well. But it's just, as we all are, we're so passionate about this. And I know you have more to tell us. There's a couple more packets. But when I hear warehousing, it just makes me sick. So I don't think that's acceptable. I hope we can do everything in our power not to warehouse anybody. It's such a short. You see, my son, not to toot his horn, if you didn't know that was my son, it goes by so quick, and these kids don't have the time. And luckily, my little girl was in the front row, 3rd grade, and that's going to go by so quick. So we don't have time to warehouse people. So, again, I usually don't get emotional about this, but you have an audience, so let's take advantage of it. I mean, we've got to be level-headed, as that's why I like Mike's side of the story. Mike Malinowski, you got to be prudent with the fiscal side of things, but you got to take advantage of your the short time we have with your kids. So I want to encourage everybody to be an advocate for this in a civil, polite manner, of course, but reach out to us, reach out to your other selectmen as well, and your state legislators, because that's the only way things are going to change. And you got to let them know what you believe in, and because otherwise, the silentness, the smaller, the people that have the voice are the ones that make a difference. So I just encourage you to do that, not to get everyone out riled up.
Well, and I would encourage your committee, why don't we let Liz work through the rest of our things, and then I'll give you a platform to express your views. How's that?
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding this, so we can plow through this, and then we'll get to the discussion after that. How's
Excellent,
that?
excellent.
Fair
So
enough?
the next one
Yes.
I have is in orange, but it might be in white in yours, and it's just a list of people that have been cut. So, some of these things happened way before I came. 2004, the state cut the Chapter 70 funds by 4%. It was a devastating year. And that these cuts, the 2004 cuts, we used to have an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction. That's all that person did. So that went away. High school social studies teacher, middle school foreign language, middle school social studies, middle school health teacher, grade 5 teacher, grade 2 teacher, grade 3 kindergarten teacher, and we had a foreign language at the elementary school then. None of that. So that was 2004. 2008, we had a technology director that did nothing but technology, but it was clear that we weren't making the progress we needed, so I replaced the technology director as a .8 position for curriculum instruction and technology. So it ended up to be a .2 cut. We consolidated the elementary school from being 2 schools to 1 under 1 principal. We cut grades 1, 2, 3, 4, middle school science, social studies, English, high school math, and a district-wide special education teacher in 2008, $500,000. Then another bad year in 2009. So the middle and the high school have always been in the same building. The middle school principal was retiring, so we did not replace him, and Scott became we had an interim middle school principal, but we eventually made the hard decision that we needed to have all the students under 1 principal. And an elementary physical education teacher, middle school math, high school comprehensive health teacher, middle school French teacher, middle school nurse, high school librarian, and a high school science teacher. So we made all those cuts.
Liz, just for the sake of time, would you kind of summarize?
Well, I want people to hear this, if you don't mind.
No, sure.
I mean, I think people need to hear, because not everybody's looking at it, you know.
This is true. This is true.
So, and then in 2011, we did 2 elementary classroom teachers, a middle school computer science teacher, middle high school English teacher, middle high school math teacher, middle high school science teacher, and a middle high school sped teacher. Teachers gave back $218,000 of their raise. A middle school technology teacher was cut in 2013, and a middle high school special education teacher. 41 teaching and administrative positions, $2,180,170 not in the budget each year from eliminated positions. In addition to that, and I won't read these, but we cut non-teaching personnel, office clerks, anything that had the title of assistant athletic director, library assistant, kindergarten clerks, custodians, hall monitors. We eliminated middle school sports, which was $15,854 in coaching, but we had a lost revenue of $24,000 with the kids paid to be part of those middle school sports. And then non-salary reductions. We had a bus fee. Everybody made it perfectly clear to me that they never wanted a bus fee again, so I did away with the bus fee because it wasn't saving us any money. But we did then realize savings by consolidating the bus runs to 2. Full-day kindergarten, 1 elementary school, and 1 middle high school. So where we were doing 5 runs, we went to 2, and we saved $100,000. We took Ben Ellis off of they sold Ben Ellis, so we were paying $27,000 just to keep it heated. We took $40,000 out of technology. We took $114 out of curriculum. We also reduced teaching supplies by a total of $100,000. So a total of all of this is $2,650,148. That accounts for money we have not spent every year since the cuts were made. So our budget could be $25 million if we hadn't already made all these cuts, if that makes sense to you. Then I did a little analysis that we lost 41 teaching positions. We did have more students, but in 2004 we had 2,097, we have 1,722 now. But we lost 21.5% of teaching positions and only 17% of the student population, so you can see the tension there. And then we've eliminated 3.2 administrative positions. There were 15, now there's 12. So we're at a bare bones to where we can keep the place safe and running as far as administrators go. You really have to have a principal for every building. You can't not have a principal. So this is the impact, and then we're thinking of adding as many as 24 more to this list.
Well, I think that statement alone in the last 9 years, we did 41, and if we're looking to do half of that in 1 year, I think that's a pretty big impact.
Yep.
Definitely.
So we mentioned, Donna Ramsey, our EAPC president, that there is something called mandates. Whether we like them or not, the government gets busy at midnight and votes that we have to do something, but they don't necessarily fund it. A good example is the discipline bill, which they voted to, that when you suspend long-term or expel a student from class, you still have to educate them. That means we'll have to provide tutoring, in some places special school that will take students who are charged with a felony, and we will be responsible for paying for that, but there's no funding for that. Fortunately, we expel almost no children in Carver. So, and even when we do suspend them long term, my little superintendent's academy, we tutor them next door. The room next door. Because I really do believe all the children, even if they make mistakes, need an education. But that's just an example of things not funded, but the legislature votes. So we have to provide ELL instruction, whether or not we have any students. And so we do that with, in 2014 this year, we have 4 students. We provide services to students with disabilities through special education and 504 plans, which is about 380 students. And although we do get circuit breaker, it's never 100%. So that's a problem. So we provide services in out-of-district placements to students who require these services. We have 23 total for 2014. We have 10 non-public placements and 13 collaborative placements, and the total cost of the budget is $1.1 million. It's a lot of money, which we do not get very much reimbursement from the state for these costs. We provide services to children 3 and 4 who have disabilities in the district preschool. In FY12, we had 16 students, but FY14, we have 48 students, which I know we are growing. Those numbers we lost as students are just funneling right back in the school system. People are having more babies and moving to Carver.
Is that number reflected in some of the increases in special ed?
Yeah.
That's
So,
a big thing.
so we provide tuitions to vocational schools, agriculture schools, and charter schools for all students who choose to attend. And I've outlined how much those each cost. Now, we have 95 students at Old Colony, but that's in the town side of the budget. That's $680,000, which is in the town budget, not in our school budget. But it still costs the town money. I mean, it's all one pot of money. And then we have to transport them to these places, and that's also a cost. I mean, although we get it at a much reduced cost because we have our own buses, it still costs money.
So is that piece of it out of our budget?
Yes.
So the transportation's on our side, the tuition is on the town side?
Yeah. So it's a good thing because we don't want that.
Gotcha.
And it's going up $80,000 on the town side, because they're doing a lot of capital improvements over at Old Colony. And they warned us in advance. We had many meetings with them. We provide a lot of transportation to out-of-district schools in addition to the tuition costs, which total cost for this year was for 2013 was $398,262. So transportation is a big cost. Now, this is partially funded mandate. McKinney-Vento is when a child is considered homeless. They can go to school in their home district, even if they're living in a shelter or any kind of other placement. Not if a child was in Carver and they ended up having to live in Barnstable. They get to come back to Carver, and we split the cost of the busing. And now there is new legislation that partially funds some of that. Thanks to Suzanne Bump, she really got that through the legislature. And special needs students need to be have extended services, summer schools, and we have about 140 students who participate in our summer programs. We also provide educational services for students from grade 12 until they are age 22 for students with significant disabilities. We do tuition in one child to our program from Middleborough, and I had a parent drop in to see me on Friday. He used to work with me when I worked in Silver Lake. He's a teacher there. And he wanted to tell me that our post-graduation class says that teacher is a national treasure, that his child has made more progress than he ever dreamed. We're doing really good things for kids here, and we're keeping them home. We're not sending them out. But I thought that was just unbelievable, because she is a national treasure. The foundation budget was a formula that was developed around ed reform in the 90s. But it's fatally flawed in many ways. It allows 1% of the budget to be allocated for all special education services. And the state average is 17% of the children in public schools are special education. So it doesn't even make sense. So if we took the 1% of our level funded budget in 2014, that would be, we'd only have $213,242 to fund all of special education, transportation, and everything. You see, it's well over millions of dollars. So if the state isn't going to fund it with Chapter 70 money, then to say we can, to say that that's all it would really cost you is 1%, you're punished on both ends. You're not getting the funds for it, and you're required to spend it. So that is a really unfunded mandate. We are over the foundation budget because we do the right thing for our children. That's why. But we are not getting the revenue in that supports it. There's, instead of percent for out-of-district, 1%, does not include all in-district education programs. So if you do in and out of district, it's about $5 million that we spend. So then I just made a big, long list of everything we have to pay for that they require us to do. And I have to tell you, most of these things we want to do. It's not like we don't want to do these things, but we can't do them when somebody doesn't give you any money to do them. And then the last page, Carver's per pupil expenditure in 2013 was, this report's always a year behind because we do it all the way up till the 1st of August of last 2013, and then it comes out around January. So we won't know 2014 until next January. But we spent $12,904 on students, and in Massachusetts, the state average is $14,000 per student. So we are way below the state average in spending on our children.
All right, thank you, Liz. With that, I'll start by opening up to the committee, and then we'll open it up to the audience after that.
Liz, I have just a quick question. The 680 for Old Colony, does that reflect the 80 increase, or is that prior to it?
Prior.
Okay.
But that'll be on the town side of the budget.
Right, well, our town, paying it one way or the other, whether we're paying the
Exactly.
town or paying here.
I'm just telling you, it's not adding on to that 22.
To that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyone else? Alrighty, to keep this, I guess, in a somewhat orderly fashion, typically in open forum, it's usually time for comment versus questions, and to give us a chance to do that. If you have a comment or there's a question that we can write down and address now, we'll try to do that. If not, it's something maybe we'll table and do our best to do that. But I will open up the microphone to give you a chance to share your community's thoughts on what you just heard. So with that, I will open the mic up to the public. Anyone has any thoughts or comments for the committee or the superintendent? Just do us a favor and state your name and where you're from, and you can move on from there.
My name's Joe Clardy. I'm from Carver. I moved here in 2005. A lot of the ideas made by the gentleman, the administrator, the man that was hired in January, were set in a report that was done in 2011, as far as consolidating things and looking at trying to do the budget. I don't know if, I mean, you guys all must have seen that. I'm just wondering why maybe it wasn't enacted earlier or started earlier.
I can speak to that a little bit. We have, for the past 6 years, consolidated all technology services for the town and the schools, and that's worked very effectively. As technology grows, we probably need a little bit more human power now to share between the two of us because we've more than tripled our technology use. But we have consolidated. At the time that was done, it saved the town side $30,000 because we used the school employees to consolidate that. We are in discussions about, and we have been even with the previous town administrator, looking at some facilities oversight consolidation. But beyond those things, everybody else has to have a specific license to do things, in schools. We only have 12 custodians, which can barely keep up with the square footage of our schools. So, but we do help each other. Now, our facilities director plows a few roads every once in a while when the town needs them. If we need a backhoe to get the snow and ice off the elementary property, then the town brings it over, and we just share those things on a good faith. But there are not too many ways, towns and schools. We're going to try to explore even more in depth some more ways to do it. But the main one, the technology has worked quite well, and we can build on that good experience.
Can I keep going?
Sure. I just want to
the $630,000 over 3 years that was given through the state on the ed fund there, was that $630,000 a year, or was it divided over 3 years, broken up?
Sure.
$630,000 total.
Total, okay. The 14 jobs that were retirements that were a nice surprise for the budget last year, were they backfill jobs?
We hired all but 2 of those.
So there's still 2 teachers out there that is not on the salary for the budget this fiscal year?
Right. But we realized over $200,000 savings because we hired people at much lower rates, but we
Right,
needed
so you're
it.
talking, that's the new hirees saved you $200,000 plus the 2 additional teachers not having them on the salary?
Correct.
Is additional to that?
Yes, correct.
Also, in that report that I read in 2011, as far as trying to find money now, there was over $2 million that I read about as far as tax liens and stuff like that that have not been collected by Carver. The previous accountant, town treasurer, whatever, according to the report, was pretty lax in his job. That's the best I can say.
If I can, and those may be valid issues, but we're just trying to deal with school committee issues at this point.
No, I'm trying to go to money.
If you're going to
trying to go to money.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
sure.
I'll eliminate that. Okay.
Sure.
But as far as that report went, if that money's out there, I mean, to look for, and if we need money right now to close a gap, to help this time right now, and then going forward, as the gentleman said, maybe we'll have more revenue coming in for 2016, 2017. I think to look towards that money now would be significant in trying to close a gap that if it's $900,000, if you can get 50% of that or 40% of that, and then find different cost cuttings along the way, you can close that gap, nobody loses their jobs, small class sizes, etc.
I agree. If we could get it, it'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we will continue. Oh, yes, sorry, you were getting up? Sure. Please just state your name and your address.
Laurie Harris, I live at Pope Street, 30-year resident of the town. I have 3 students that have successfully come through Carver schools. So I'm a proponent. I'm very happy to have my students go here. I now have 2 grandchildren entering the schools. Not liking what I'm hearing. I was just wondering, with all of your experience, Liz, have you seen, what impact have you seen on the students if the class sizes are large?
Well, I can tell you some Carver experience, if you like.
Okay.
There was a time when Carver had 40 kids in a class, way, way, way back, but I'm not speaking of that. When I first came here, we were very lucky to have 12 and 14 children in our elementary school classes. And in some of those classes, we had 2 teachers because we had a multi-age group. But yet our performance was very low. Less than 50% of the children were performing at grade level. So we took a different approach to this, and we established a reading program that every child gets 90 minutes of core instruction in reading. Then every child goes to a reading specialist or a special education teacher and gets an extra 45. Even the kids above grade level, they get some enrichment.
Okay.
So since we've done that, we've had this huge increase in performance unrelated to how, and that while the class size is continually growing, unrelated to class size. Now, there is a breaking point of that. I realize that. But so far, our experience has been from the very lowest class size to the largest we've experienced, the kids get better and better every year. Because we've put these support structures in where you're really breaking the children down into groups of 3 or 4 for their reading class. In some cases, they're 6 or 7, just depending on their need. And we also do the same, not quite as intensively, but a modified version of that in mathematics, where they have extra support from their classroom. So, from my own personal experience, I worked in inner city Cincinnati. I taught 183 children. And I gave them 183% of my teaching. It wasn't easy. I don't recommend it. But on tough times, you just have to do tough things. I was a young teacher. I didn't realize that this was unusual. You know, I just thought, this is what they do here. But I don't want to go here, but I don't see very many options. short of a miracle, and I don't see any on the horizon. I don't think it will be, I don't think you will feel it immediately. Should this continue for a very long time, I think there will be an impact that we can't yet predict.
What do you consider a very long time?
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
You know, if kids in elementary school having, yeah.
And I had one other question. Do you have anyone who is actively looking for grant opportunities?
We bring in almost $1 million every year in what's called entitlement grants. And we have another $1 million in grants and salaries, almost, you know. We don't put the teachers in those grants except in special education because that's what the grant's for.
Right.
Because then we have to pay the extra 9% tax to the state on that. So, but we can hire paraprofessionals and alleviate that piece of the budget to that. I just turned in 3 grants yesterday, and since I've been here, I think I've brought in $7 or $8 million worth of unentitlement grants and
But competitive grants? And
but they
do you
don't
have any that you're looking at for this year that could possibly?
They don't fund salaries.
No.
They only fund stuff. So that's how we got.
But could you adjust some of your expenditures?
Well, there's something called, you can't replace an existing expense. You can't, you know, they're very careful about that. People want to fund new ideas, new programs. Now, if you're a big city, there's some opportunity for some technology grants and things like that, but we just don't qualify for those.
Because of the size of the community?
Yes, unfortunately, they give all those big grants to big cities. But we do write grants. Meredith writes grants, I write grants. Private citizens have helped us write grants. And by and large, we're really successful. All of this technology in here and all this furniture came from Makepeace. Makepeace has given us several $100,000 over the time they've been given their grants.
And that's what the name of the room, okay?
Yeah.
I thought it was like TD Bank North, you know, they're paying for the room.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone hears of a grant, I'm happy to write it, you know, but it's...
I just didn't know if you had anything that you thought you hadn't written yet, but could possibly help for 15.
Right now, I don't know of anything. Supposedly, there might be some more early childhood grants coming out from EEC, Early Education and Care. We applied for one that they were supposed to tell us about on February 1st, Karen, is that when it is? Yeah, and every time I look on the website, there's so many applications were delayed. And that was $40-some thousand, so.
Okay.
I scour it, and all of my employees scour I get a little newsletter every week called Grants Alert. I read every page of it, but there's just not much out there for this.
Not a lot of money, no.
Right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, anyone else?
I have a question, but do I have to go up there?
Please do for our viewing audience, yes. Just so they're not going, what's going on over there?
Well, I just want clarification.
Sure.
My name's Bree Wall, and I live in Carver. The budget that you have presented and the cuts the worst case scenario cuts is for level funded, correct? That's just staying the same, just level, correct? Just be sure I understand.
Yeah, that's it.
Could we possibly not get level funded? And it would be worse than 24 cuts.
Well, I was very happy to hear our town administrator says he thought we'd be level funded because we've been talking back and forth because we're both trying to get a handle on this. And, you know, at one point there was a chance that it could be, he said, a negative number, but that's why I didn't commit to a level funded tonight.
So it could. It like come town meeting time in June, we might not get level funded and just level funded would be still cut 24 teachers.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want. So it could be worse.
Or
and it could get
a little better with a few more retirements. I'm hoping we get this down to, well, I'm hoping it's nothing, but 20 seems to be more realistic hope, because I could have some retirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just wanted
Thank you.
clarification.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
So I do just want to clarify, Bree, that this is past cuts, those are in the past. Okay, good. I just want to make sure I didn't say something wrong.
I just needed to understand the level funded and
Yeah.
cuts
Yeah.
and what it could be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the MSBA updates.
So I'd just like to report that I filed the enrollment projection form and the educational profile form with MSBA, and they have notified me of the receipt of both of those forms, and we will be scheduling an enrollment conference. I can say that I put in the data for only 1 year, and that's this year. The rest of it they have off of the Department of Education's website. And then they issue a little projection. So they project that any new building would be built for 915 students, which differs by 10 from before.
It's a little different from...
Yeah, 925. So, but I thought that was pretty much still in the ballpark. I mean, this year they said our total school population would be 1724, and this year it's 1722. So I think their projections are pretty accurate. And then I'm getting together with the town administrator tomorrow, and we're going to go over the school building committee appointments. And then we'll file that. And Patrick and Dave Seidentoff are working on the building maintenance report, which we should get in by the end of next week.
Great. So at this point, we're on track for their timeline, everything's...
We're way ahead of
Good
their
there.
timeline.
Awesome, great.
So that's really good. Patrick, I guess you're next.
All right, yes, moving on to building updates.
Okay, before I get to the building update, I just want to make some really good news.
We like good news.
Of an event that I was at today. We have, through our culinary instructor, Chef Dan Portalence, we have a group that, sometimes it's two groups, this year it was only one, where they compete in the Pro-Startville culinary competition. It's, first of all, it's a statewide competition, and then it's a national competition. The last 4 years, Carver has won the statewide management competition, and 3 of the last 4 years, I think they've won also the culinary. Well, today they've also been nice enough to let me work along with them a little bit, and that's been a really interesting and fun experience. So today we were with 5 students, and we were at Tri-County Vocational in Franklin, where the competition was held. And the good news is, Carver's management team took first place again. So they captured. They captured the state title for the Pro-Startville management competition, and they will be going to represent the state of Massachusetts in the first weekend of May, in Minneapolis this year.
Whoa.
So
Different than
that's going to be, so that is that was a very nice thing to see today. And the kids, which is, I want to just tell you who they are. It's Ellie Backman-Beliveau, Amanda Cody, Craig Lazan, Sam Reed, and Amy Sutherland. Craig and Amy were actually on the team with us last year. So they were tremendously excited today as they won their competition, and looking forward to going to Minneapolis in May, representing the state of Massachusetts. Last year they came in 8th in the country, so they're looking to do a little better than that, hopefully coming in first. But there was another group there today that was it was really just something that was really out of the ordinary. Was in the culinary, the cooking part of it, there was a team from Nantucket Island, And typically, there's 7 students on a culinary cooking team. Well, for a couple of unfortunate reasons, 5 of the 7 from Nantucket were not able to make the trip. So the instructor came with only 2 students. They took first place. It was an amazing thing to see, the instructor and the kids, and there was some tough competition there. And they took first place. That was really something, and that was, Dan Portlands was very, very friendly with the Nantucket instructor, and the two students were actually crying. They were so happy. So that was a great thing to see. So I'm very fortunate that I get to work with these kids too. So that's some good news. On the just a little building and facilities update, our visitor badging system now has been installed in our 3 main entrances, and it's been in use now for a few weeks. These are temporary ID badges for any visitors that enter the building through the main office. What they do is you can take an ID, you can take a driver's license or a name and a date of birth and enter it in the system, and it's instantly and automatically cross-referenced with a national sex offender database. So on the spot, this happens, and it prints out a temporary badge with a photo on it that people wear while they're in the building during the day. So it's a pretty neat system, and that was one of the things that we, speaking of grants, we did get a grant for this. We got a $10,000 grant to complete this phase of our security, actually from our insurance company. So that was a pretty neat thing to see. And we're also working on a complete staff ID badging system, and that'll be complete in a couple of weeks. We've got all the equipment. We're in the process of doing that right now. As far as the buildings go, we had a leak a week or so ago back in the Irwin K. Washburn building. Hot water line, which was repaired. We had approximately 20 feet of corroded copper pipe. Unfortunately, it was the hot water, and we had to deal with that hot water for a good part of the morning of that one day last week. And we also had a defective smoke alarm devices up at the middle high school, which caused 2 separate fire alarms or false alarms in the building in the past month have both been replaced. So not too much to report there. Hopefully, we've gotten past the worst part of the winter and the cold weather. And that's always a big concern to us is to get into the month of March, and then we see a little light. We see a little light ahead. So that's it for the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
So, Scott is going to report on just a little bit short update on what we're doing with mobilizing the community. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
I have applied for a grant to fund some basic community information for this. We asked Mike for $3,500 to move this forward.
So we had our last Mobilizing the Community meeting on Tuesday, March 4th, and it was outstanding again to see 86 people in attendance. It was just a tremendous turnout.
That's great.
So over the last couple of months, we've seen some really strong support from the community for us to take some action against the concerns of substance abuse within the community of Carver. And what we did at that meeting is we took the 86 participants, some of them were in the room tonight, several of them actually, and we divided up into small groups, and the goal was to just generate ideas. What things can we do as the community of Carver to have a positive impact? So I just gave the community members a list of the ideas that were generated that evening, and there was a total of 97 in all. So 97 ideas were generated. And what we're going to do at our next meeting, which is on Tuesday, March 25th at 6:30 in the middle high school cafeteria, we're going to put all these ideas up on poster boards, and we're going to give everybody who in attendance 5 red dots. In essence, and they can spend their 5 dots however they want. They can put all 5 on one idea and say, this is what we really want to do. They can spread those 5 dots across any 5 ideas they want, or any combination of math you'd like to do around that. And then we're going to say, you know what, let's look at 5 or 10 things that we want to commit to as a community that we're going to do. And at that point, based on what people select as ideas, we're going to break off into committee groups and ask people to join a committee around supporting one of those ideas to make sure it actually happens, with the goal, again, of trying to have a positive influence on decision-making of our both high school age students and our young adults, because this is an epidemic that is really affecting the 18 to 25-year-olds as much as it's affecting 12 to 18-year-olds at the middle high school level. So that's a brief update of where the committee stands and what we'll be doing. I would love to see 86 to 100 people or more at our meeting on Tuesday, March 25th at 6:30 in the middle high school.
Cafeteria?
Oh, sorry.
Is it going to be in the cafeteria?
In the cafeteria again, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Any questions, or Liz, I don't know if there's anything you want to add, because Liz has been a really active participant in this, as is many of the community members. Chief Dufley's been there, Chief Weston, town administrator, select members of the selectmen. So it really has been a community effort.
Great. Anyone have any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I didn't make the first meeting, but I thought the format was excellent at this last meeting, and it was a very nice turnout. There were a lot of great ideas floating around. I think what's important is the follow-through on that, and it sounds like there's a good plan in place for that to make sure that we keep moving forward. And I think that's really the key, because ideas are great things, but unless we really do something about them, they're still just an idea. And we need to make sure that if this is such an important thing in the community, that we continue to move forward with a good plan, because that's really how you make the ideas work. The other comment I just wanted to make is that there will be childcare again there this time, which
we had childcare last time,
right,
from the Y, and there will be childcare on the 25th as well.
And hopefully those with children will take advantage of that and find the opportunity to get out and be involved, because it was organized very well. So I think it was a productive meeting. It wasn't a waste of time in any way, and I think everybody really worked together well through the process.
So the grant I applied for was on the idea that we need to brand our work in the community. And a couple people came up with ideas about what we would sort of make a statement that really explains what we're doing. And sort of the beginning of it was Carver Cares. And that by branding, and this is other communities on the South Shore that belong to the Youth Health Connection have done this, and so there's buttons, there's bumper stickers, so the community begins to see that we're gathering together by branding our efforts. And so I applied to Makepeace for some funds to do that, banners, all the things we talked about at the meeting, and so hopefully I asked for a small enough amount of money but it will go a long way with this $3,500. So that's where we are, and we'll hopefully get a little money behind what we're going to do too. And the police are more than willing to invest time and effort, and they're going to look into some police grants for stuff like this too. So we're moving along.
Well, I think this is another perfect example of how the towns come together and really the various parts and departments and really working together to help solve a problem. So, great work.
And I would just like to also thank the members of the committee. Paul has been very active at mobilizing the committee. James came to our last meeting, and so it's also been the committee supporting the work of the community as well.
Although we're more visible now, we've been meeting for 2 years, so it's been a long-term effort.
And I just wanted to jump on the tail end of that and say that because I have been a part of it from very early on, it was a very small group for a long time. And I think the culmination of a certain few events that happened, a new Facebook page, some coverage in the Carver Reporter of a picture of needles, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the recent deaths here, all that kind of all of a sudden grabbed everyone's attention. And so 2 meetings ago, we had around 100 people, and then we had 86. And I would just implore everybody, please pop in, spend some time. I don't want to see those numbers drop. We've got some momentum going, and the only way we're going to make it happen is if we keep it going. And it's a great group of people. You learn a lot about your neighbors, and it's just so important for all of our kids in our community. So please do try to join us if you can.
Thanks, Paul.
I'd like to just advertise once more that there's childcare present, and I think a lot of people didn't go last time because they didn't know if there'd be childcare, and now we can just reiterate that there's childcare available.
What was the time again? Was it 6:30?
It's 6:30 on the 20th.
6:30, and we really made an attempt to be done by 8. We were done a little after 8. I think an hour and a half is a good time frame for people. So that would be the goal, 6:30.
Great.
There is a Facebook page too, and I'll put the meeting date and that there's childcare up there so people can look for that. It's called Mobilizing the Community on Facebook.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to say before we move on to the field trip that all of these budget documents plus the individual presentations made by the principals, special education director will be available on our website. So if people want to examine them more in depth, we'll get them all posted up there this week. So
Sure, and in case you weren't a part of it, we've been doing this for the last several meetings. Each department and school has been presenting their budget so that you can find the details, as Liz mentioned, on the website. Great.
thank you. And then the last thing we have is a field trip to the Westin Copley Hotel in Boston for the Model UN. And they will actually be there 2 nights. And so they're coming to us to ask for permission, and I highly recommend this as a wonderful opportunity for our students and their teachers.
Great. With that, I will welcome a motion here.
I would like to make a motion to approve the field trip for the 3 nights in March for the Model UN to Boston.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous. All right. Thank you, Liz. With that, we'll move on to reports from the school committee. Anyone? Barry, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I don't have too much to say, so I appreciate you having me defer, because now I'm a little more calm, so thank you, Mr. Chairperson. That's always good to count to 10. And the same message applies, though. The group's a little smaller, but spread the word. You got to speak up, whether it's to us, your selectmen, Mr. Malinowski, the new town administrator, your local, your state legislators, Mark Pacheco, state senator, Susan Williams Gifford, state rep. By you talking, it's hard to get in a microphone, I know that. But by you speaking to us on a one-on-one basis or in a forum, that's going to be so valuable. And then we know, I feel how I feel, I'm going to tell everybody. So I count on you guys to tell us how you feel, and the majority wins, right? That's how democracy works. So don't hesitate. I know we're all busy with our lives. I'm busy with my life. You got to get out there, write a letter, email, telephone call, and that's what we're here for, too. We want to hear from you. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Barry.
Excellent, Barry, I agree.
And I just want to follow that up, if I can jump in, Lance.
Absolutely.
We have something called Day on the Hill, where the Mass Association of School Committees, and for years Lance went, I went a couple years, Barry, I think you went once. It's where a bunch of people from different school committees and sometimes students go up, and we are able to talk to the people at the State House and make our voices heard. And I'm going to disagree a little bit with Barry. Of course I want to hear from everybody, but there's only so much I can do as a school committee member. The real people that need to hear from you are the legislators. They need to cut the unfunded mandates out. They're killing us, and we can't change that, but they can. So if anyone does want to take some more direct action, it's up at that level, whether it's an email, a letter. Talk to the people at the state level, please, and let them hear from Carver. They'll take notice. Thank you.
James?
I second all of that. I think that's the best direction to go, but also to remember that, as we talk through this tonight, goes beyond just the school issue. This is a town issue. We've got, whether it's town budget or school budget, it's our budget. And we need to find a way to make this whole thing work for our community as a whole. And there's ways to do that as long as people are involved. And, in order for action to happen, people have to get up. And we need to make sure that we're staying involved to make this happen on all levels.
Okay. Gina?
I agree.
No. Sounds good. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to all those that came out tonight. I think from this pulpit, we've always preached, get involved, get involved. So I appreciate those that have taken the time to get involved. I think in my 6 years here in the town, I think that's one of the biggest struggles, and we talk about the challenges this town can present is apathy, and I think that's hurt us, if anything, over the last few years. And when we talk about planning and forecasting and moving forward, we need to do better at that. It is unfortunate that my career has moved me out of state, and so I am not running for re-election, and this will be next will be my last meeting. But my encouragement to the community is to continue. Don't let this die here. Please continue to fight for what you believe in, because I think it's important as a community we come together, and I think we're seeing that. We're starting to see glimpses and baby steps, but we need to continue that. Things you care about, get involved. That's really what it comes down to. So if I could say anything, it's that. Don't sit at home, get out in a nice way. But I am encouraged, and I know that this committee and those that run in the future will continue that. I know we've got some work ahead and some challenges, but I know that everyone in this room is passionate about this community, and we'll continue. So I thank those that have supported me through this process. I've learned a lot, and it's been a great process. So
We got one more meeting, though.
one more meeting. I'm not done yet, but
You're not skipping out on April.
no, I'm here. I'm here. But so with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Kay?
Yes.
Just
We-
speaking of getting involved, I wanted
Yes.
to remind everyone that we have a PTO meeting on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. in the Governor John Carver cafeteria.
So just so for the audience, PTO meeting Wednesday at
7 p.m.
7 p.m. in the cafeteria.
Yes, and Thursday, parent-teacher conferences.
Thursday, parent-teacher conferences as well. So don't forget those, parents.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.